Hello and welcome to the Lens at 177, and today we continue our discussion as we move towards the general election on December 14th. And joining me today is Shamima Ali, coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Shamima, welcome to the program. First question, obviously, what's the state of women's rights in Fiji?
Well, the state of women's rights is always in chaos, and it's not good at any point in time. And as long as you have violence against women, high rates of violence against women, that means that women's rights are seriously compromised, and that is the situation now. But I'd just like to say that, we have things in place, have been in place for some time in recent years, particularly the country gender assessment. There's a report that has been done months ago, and followed by the National Action Plan for the Prevention of All Forms of Violence Against Women and Girls. So these two documents are very important for any government, for any country, to straighten things out, to put in the budgetary requirements, to develop policies, programming, and a strategy to achieve gender equality. But unfortunately, these are stuck. They haven't been to cabinet yet, and so on. The approval hasn't been given yet. But these should have been out a couple of months ago, and we're still awaiting those two documents, and particularly the country gender assessment. It's a thorough assessment carried out by the Ministry for Women in consultation with the NGOs, CSOs, and other stakeholders and consultants. And we're really awaiting that, but it's still sitting out there somewhere.
No political will to push?
Yes, there isn't any, because look, many people talk about women's rights and how good we are at it and do the bare necessities, but it's not from the heart, and no true commitment, politically or otherwise, to attain gender equality or ending violence against women or improving women's status.
Did things go haywire when Mereseni Vuniwaga went out and Madam Rosenberg came in?
Well, you see, when Mereseni came in, we did not have as much interaction with the ministry as we did during her time as Minister for Women. She really brought stakeholders together, civil society together, and she did make use of the expertise that was particularly within the feminist movement, the feminist groups and so on, as well as other groups that have been working in advancing women and so on. So, and there was a lot of consultation for the prevention plan, for the gender assessment report and things like that. But and things were in place for the launch to have happened, like this 16 days of activism is coming up starting on Friday, and we're looking for the NAPT, the prevention plan, to be launched, that, and the CGA just previous to that, so, but things seem to have been in the doldrums since she left.
Does the FWCC need recognition from government for the work it does?
We've got a lot of recognition. This is we're nearing 4th decade of our existence, from 1984, and we've done tremendous work in terms of promoting women's human rights and ending violence against women and so on. And government does recognize us. Each successive government has recognized us, and the present one does, but holding them accountable has its issues. And I believe that is the role of people like us. But recently, 5 years ago, we were also recognized by government. The fact that we are in consultations and we are the preferred training group on GBV, anything on GBV and so on, for Ministry for Women, and also the fact that they have contracted us to run the national toll-free helpline for domestic violence, 1560, and they pay us $200,000 a year to run that line, so that is recognition, but that doesn't mean that tech stop.
So why does an organization like yours need to have government in check?
Look, I just wanted to read something, and this is on the 7th of October, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said, "Civil society groups are the oxygen of democracy." And I believe we are, and catalysts for peace, social progress, and economic growth. And he goes on, about how we keep governments accountable and carry the voices of the vulnerable into the halls of power, etc., etc. So those words are profound, And that is what we civil society organizations, the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, which works within the framework of democracy, human rights and rule of law, we take that to heart, and that's how we do our business.
Then why do you think the Attorney General attacks you constantly?
Look, I have been through all the coups from 1987. I've been through all the governments since then, you know, whether it's SVT, SDL, Labour, whoever, you know, and now this particular regime. I have never been as attacked. There were attacks every now and then, you know, but we still could sit down and talk together. We could still have meetings and have talanoa sessions and listen to both sides and so on. This time it is extreme. Every little thing we say, holding government accountable. This government does not like accountability, to be held accountable, but we see that as our role. And this government also has got a very narrow, it's very limited understanding of the word political. Yes, if the wider one is political, is when we work towards bringing about change. And that is what we do. The feminist movement is such, civil society is such, when we work towards advancing the rights of vulnerable people, or of anyone, of everyone. That is our role, and our politics is that. It doesn't mean that because we're holding government accountable, we're critiquing government policies and so on, keeping them in line, that is our job, then it doesn't mean that we are pulling a particular political party line. It doesn't mean that at all, you know. So unfortunately they think that is what we are doing, but that's an excuse also. I think the Attorney General, we've worked together for a long time. He was on this side of the line some time back, 87, 2000 and so on. And he has grown up with the women's movement as a young man. He was with us. So he understands exactly what we are doing. But as I said, he often obfuscates the issue, and that is what he's doing when he starts attacking us. This government doesn't want any criticism, no matter from what quarter, you know. So that's where we are.
You seem unfazed by all the criticism. What drives you? What keeps you going?
I think I would call myself a matriarch of the women's movement, one of the matriarchs, and I've been in it for so long. I have, you know, I also have been arrested in the past and so on. We have, you know, so if I have stood up as a human rights defender, I was also I'm a former human rights commissioner. That is my job. That is what I have dedicated my life to. So these people, whatever they say, I do admit that there is a lot of fear now because of all the numerous laws that can get into us into trouble. We don't know how to interpret these laws. Only the people who have drawn up the laws understand that, you know. But this is our job. This is what we do, you know. This is what we are mandated by organization to do. And so, you know, my motto is I stand up for what I believe is right, even if I'm standing alone, and that is how we do our work. And we have to do it fearlessly. We have to lose the fear.
Did you consider contesting the elections that's coming up?
I was approached, and I thought very carefully about it. And I said, no, look, I'm going to be 70 in a few months' time, you know, and I think I don't think this is the time to enter that foray. But I think I'm doing quite well outside of it. And to tell you the truth, I actually don't find a party I like. I cannot work within, I mean, I like things about different parties, but I cannot work within confined patriarchal boundaries, you know, and so I don't think I will fit in. And with the parliament like we have now, I think not at all. I'll be told to go out every minute and so on. So I think I'm doing quite well outside, but I would like to, you know, after this election, I would like to work with women and like-minded men, you know, who believe in human rights, women's rights and so on. I would like to have a cadre of people who, when they enter politics, the center of it is it's centered in human rights, democracy, the rule of law. Any development must be centered around these pillars of democracy. So, you know, that is what I would like to do, and have that cadre of people who can go around in all the parties or form another party that would have that. So that's my ambition at the moment.
For that to happen, change in government has to take place?
I believe that it is time for a change. I sincerely believe that, you know. I mean, I don't think, you know, that we are going anywhere right now. And for that to happen, it might not happen this election, even though a lot of people would be wishing that it does happen, but I'm sure for the next election there will be people, young people who are very savvy, politically very savvy now, that there'll be an opportunity for that.
Shamima Ali, thank you very much. We'll take a short break and continue the discussion after that.
We were around when the deed was first signed. We were around when the first car engine roared. We were around when the very first was crowned. Through devastations, jubilant celebrations, and the milestones. We will continue to be around to bring you all the stories first.
Welcome back. Today we are talking to Shamima Ali of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Shamima, can I have your thoughts on this one? Are women's rights adequately protected in Fijian laws currently?
Something else is the current government has done over the past few years, since it came in, since they have got these new laws. They have enacted the laws that were sitting on the shelf previous to do, and made some changes, and that is the Domestic Violence Act, the Crimes Act. So a lot of protection within the law, the written law, but we fall flat at implementation level, whether it be in the court, because the old patriarchal thoughts are still there. We're not on the same page. So with police, we have a lot of problems. The police is very much, up and down the way they respond, and so on. And in recent years, we've seen that they've really, in terms of responding to violence against women and protecting, we've got very good restraining orders and things like that. That is where we fall flat, though the laws written are protective, but how it is acted out, it's not.
So where are the shortfalls for all this you have talked about?
Well, I believe that we don't look at international best practice. People don't want to listen to the experts like us. We are the experts, whether people like it or not. We are the experts. They don't want to listen. And also, like for example, the police is one of our biggest problems amongst our stakeholders. While the health system also does not respond adequately, the courts, though we have got very good rape laws and so on, they still fall back. But it starts right at the police station, at the reporting stage. We lose a lot of cases because they don't get the kind of appropriate responses they should be getting. Police training does not include, like it used to before, at least 3 days of training on gender-based violence, all the different dynamics, and so on, and how to respond to it and things like that. So that training has gone out the window. Actually, since 2006, we used to have regular training. Now there are people who are training, but they're not the experts. They're not on the ground doing that. That's the biggest problem. So a lot of cases go by the wayside. If women reach us, there is hope, because we keep on following up. We actually have had to hire a retired police officer as our liaison officer, who follows up with each case, and we've managed to reopen cases that had been filed away and so on. So that is one of our biggest, and just the attitudes with service providers and so on. We're not on the same page, starting from the leaders. We also have our leaders who indulge in very violent practices, and they say things, while the Constitution says something else about equality, out of their mouths come out things that are in total opposition to what they have already stated in the Constitution. So, leadership also needs to convey that message to everybody, that it will not be all forms of violence will not be tolerated, and particularly violence against women, and what we say about women, what we say about LGBT, and so on.
How does human rights fit into the work you do?
Our work is about human rights, because we say women's rights are human rights. Right. And what we find, and particularly feminist groups like us and the Fiji Women's Rights Movement, we believe that when we're talking about achieving gender equality, equity, leveling the uneven playing field and so on, it has to have a rights-based approach. We have to come to that. So, and best practice and research globally by UN agencies, particularly UN Women, has shown that most effective strategies and methodologies are those that have a rights-based approach, which is a feminist approach, looking at whatever is happening to women as a violation of women's human rights. So our work, that is the core of our work, is that it's centered around human rights.
Today we are talking to Shamima Ali, and Shamima, let me ask this question about data. What's the data telling you on the types of crimes, the operation rate for women in the country?
Okay, so oppression is a whole lot of stuff, violations, and one of them is the issue of violence against women. The last national survey showed us that 64% of women, that is 2 in 3, we are double the global average. We and other countries like Kiribati, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, where we follow the same WHO methodology, this is very high. We are double the world average. So when we have rates like that of violence against women and girls, then that means there's something very wrong. We don't even have to go to the data. But then we also have to look at the representation of women on boards, in parliament and so on. So all that data tells us there's a lot of oppression, there's a lot of violation of women's human rights, and that comes from patriarchy. The patriarchy oppresses and so on. So, and because of the systems that are so patriarchal. And in terms of violence against women, while we can see advances and everyone coming to the table, it's now almost on everyone's agenda, faith-based organizations that were very hard to get into and so on. While it is there, we have made those kind of advances, the good laws and and things like that. Then we have disasters, we have political instability, then we had COVID, and that exacerbates the situation, that takes us back. So our job is to keep there and give the push back again. Don't let it drop right over. But that worsens the situation. COVID, we had the highest rates. We saw an increase of 300% in reporting of domestic violence. So it's slowly going down now, but it is still more than pre-COVID rates. It still is higher than the pre-COVID rates. So those things then take us back, and you have to push back. People are very impatient. And they're saying, oh, well, that doesn't work, so we have to do something. It's not going to go away like that. This is centuries and centuries of oppression that we are trying to only chipping away at it, no matter how much time we spend on this or how much money we spend on this. So, while we can make some progress, we cannot, there are some things that are beyond our control.
So all these crimes still happening against women, girls, is it okay for a politician to go overseas and claim Fiji is the place to stay and it's heaven?
See, this is another thing. We hide. And I think one of the reasons the country gender assessment is not coming out is because I don't think it is showing very good, in a very favorable place, the situation of women and girls in this country. We have to be very honest about it, because violence against women, gender inequality is throughout the world, no matter where you are. In Australia, I think about 2 women a week die from domestic violence. So everywhere it is there. So it's okay to say, look, we are wonderful, but we still have this, and things like that. So, and we have to be very honest about it. Even if we are inviting visitors here, we have to tell them the truth about what the situation is in our country and don't hide it and things like that. So I don't think it's fair to say that when we have all these issues here. That's lying.
Let's talk about women in politics. Data from the Fijian Elections Office for this election shows 16.4% candidates only are women. What's the underlying reason women are not coming forward?
Well, see, I always take people back to patriarchy, because male-dominated systems where only men are seen as leaders for eons, for all the time. So people are used to seeing male leaders. So they don't vote. They feel that they start believing through years of conditioning that they make the best leaders, head of the household, in the community, traditional leaders, religious leaders and so on, than we see in parliament. Over years, there's been only men. So it's very difficult for women to come into it because women are judged differently than men. And women are shamed, you know, over the years about their personal lives and so on. Whereas a man can have 100 affairs and he has beaten up his wife, but he's still a man, he's a leader, he's saying the right things. Women are judged very harshly. So a lot of women fear that unless they have come into their own. We also are not in the habit of voting for women. I mean, look at the Fiji Teachers Union. You know, we've never had a woman president, and yet over 60% of the teaching population is female. So why don't we ever have a woman in there? Because we're used to doing that. That is why we were asking for temporary special measures. The first round of the GAI consultations, on the constitutional consultations, we were asking for temporary special measures. Temporary special measures means you have a quota system. So each political party has to have this many women candidates standing, and you allocate seats, you reserve seats for women. It's only 10. Then we were told, oh, then everyone, the disabilities and the lesbian and everybody else will want to have seats, all the different. It's not, it's about women. Whether the woman is from the LGBT community, whether the woman is from the disabilities community, or any other woman. Those seats are for them, you know, so they make excuses like that and they say we can't have this quota. You can't, because it says temporary. Once you have that, you have to create this critical mass of women going in. You just let them in. Sometimes they say, no, we only want suitable women. How many times have we said that, you know, we only want suitable men entering politics? We don't say that, but about women we do. So you have to create this critical mass. And once women start getting voted in, you know, more and more women will join, you have those reserved seats and so on. Once they start voting, they get used to having a woman leader, and women will do wonderfully well, you know, and they will, because they run the household and everything else, and you know, and they can run the country, they know about budgeting, they know everything, and they can do it, and there are very good women around who can lead the country. So then people will start voting. So once people start voting for them, you remove the temporary measures. That's how it should work. But it was knocked back in the Kayyum Bainimarama constitution, you know, so that was knocked back and so on. So that is why you need to encourage women. So I'm glad to see it's 16.4%. The present the dissolved parliament had less than 10%. So 16.4% are going in. Still small amount, a small number, but you know, the way parliament works now also, men are scared to go in, you know, so, you know, and women who often don't have, you know, who don't have the kind of support that men do, so they also fear that. But I'm so glad to see at least that many, and I think we should vote for women. Women make the best leaders. I'll say to everybody, vote women in, and then you can see the changes.
Shamima, thank you very much. We'll take a short break and see you on the other side. Welcome back, Shamima Ali. Let's continue the discussion, and let me ask you this question. Does Fiji need a Ministry of Women on its own?
Definitely, I believe we do, and we did. After 1987, the next government that came in, it established the Ministry for Women. You know, they started with the National Women's Machinery, then we had the Ministry for Women. And it does, because when it is put together with social welfare and children, those themselves are huge entities. And to put them together, the women often get submerged. And therefore, it's important for them to have that, given the situation of women, the situation of, you know, as far as gender equality and equity and so on is concerned. So I believe that it should. And I believe a better thing would be to have a commission for women, you know, a commission for women, and attached to the Prime Minister's office to give it importance, and a commissioner for women that, and it should consult with the amount of work that has been done in Fiji, consult with civil society organizations, NGOs and so on, in consultation with that. In fact, I think, you know, when after elections, whichever government, the next government comes into power, they have a huge opportunity to consult with civil society organizations, so women's, feminist women's movement and so on, to do the best for women. And you know, like, one can't do these things on their own, as some people like to believe, that they're the only sole experts in every area, that consultation would really see us moving forward the women's agenda.
And what type of person should be the minister responsible for women? What's the checklist, if I have to give you a checklist?
Not just anyone, you know, from permanent secretary to the director to the women. They must have some background in working in gender and a lot of experience around that area. That's the kind of person we're looking at, not just anyone that you pick and choose, you know, and then just put them there, and they're left floundering, they don't know what to do, and so on. So I believe that definitely a background and a proven track record in the area of promoting, you know, gender equality, women's human rights, and so on.
You'll need a lot of money to do the work for the ministry if it's established on its own. What's the estimate looks like if you do have a budget to propose?
Look, I can't say. I'm not an economist, I'd like to admit, but I can't say. But it does require right now, you know, and as you know, as in any ministry, once you start setting things in place, it starts working, you've got the civil society to lie back on, and so on. Definitely you have to make a commitment. There has to be a budgetary commitment as well as a political commitment to it, and you really mean what you say. So I think it will need a lot of money in the beginning with all the work, and particularly with the CGA, the country gender assessment. If that comes out, that will give us a lot of pointers as to how we can move forward and make it better for women.
You have been with the FWCC for long. Any politician in Fiji stands out, in your view, who has done more than other in advancing the rights of women in this country?
The only one that, I have that history of working with people. Some have been terrible. There was only one that stands out for me, and that has had that, is Meriseni Rakwita. And during her time, there's been a lot of interaction, consultation. It's been very, very participatory. So she's the only one who stands out for me, even though she was there only for a short time. But you know, no, and I think Ms. Akbar, the Minister Akbar, now, this time around, this is her second go at it, is saying the right things, and so on, but still we haven't met as yet her second time around in the ministry.
New government or the same government coming in after elections, what should be their priority in terms of what we have discussed here today? What should they do immediately to start recognizing women's rights? Let's start with if a new government comes in.
When the government comes in, I believe there are a lot of things they will be doing. I hope they give priority, I'm hoping, and we'll hold them accountable, give priority to women, because we are slightly, a little bit more than half the population, you know, so on. So, and they have to give priority to women. So I believe if they are restructuring ministries and so on, which I believe they will have to do with individual ministers for ministries and so on, I believe that the setting up a commission for women, you know, I think that would be a priority.
What's your message to young women out there who will be casting their votes?
I say to everyone, please make use of that vote. Do not fear anything anyone tells you. I just want to say to people, do not fear anything anyone tells you. Vote with your heart, vote with your experiences of the last few years, but do cast your vote. I just want to say something else, you know, because it is on the 14th of December, the election is on the 14th of December. This is when we move, you know, particularly the Itoke movement. These are Christmas plans are being, Itoke community. The Christmas plans are being made, and we move. I would say to people, stay put near your polling station, because now you can only vote at your polling station, apart from other ways of voting, but you have to vote from there. So stay put and make your vote count. If you are 18 and over, make your voice count, and everyone get there whichever way you can. You know, as Martin Luther King said, if you can't fly, you run. If you can't run, you walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But for goodness sake, I would add on, cast your vote on that day, on 14th of December.
Final question, how long will you continue doing this work you do?
Till I have cleaned up the polluted stream and mainstreamed everything. I will work for as long as my brain is working, for as long as I can. I know there is a lot of criticism that I'm here and I'm getting old, and the new, there's a lot of ageism. The new guard should take place and so on. And for me, as long as the organization says that I need to continue, and as long as I feel my brain is working, and my aim is to achieve gender equality, that women must have their full human rights. The dream out there is end all forms of violence against women, girls and children. And that's what I work through. And I think, they say feminists don't go out with a whimper, they go out with a bang, and that's what I aim to do.
Before we end, I would like you to read that message you read by the UN Secretary General. It's very enlightening, and I hope we can end the program with that.
Sure. Okay. So, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on 7th of October 2022 talked about civil society groups, and he said, civil society groups are the oxygen of democracy and catalysts for peace, social progress and economic growth. They help keep governments accountable and carry the voices of the vulnerable into the halls of power. Yet today, civic space is narrowing across the world. Human rights defenders, women's rights advocates, environmental activists, journalists, and others face arbitrary arrest, harsh prison sentences, smear campaigns, crippling fines, and violent attacks. Let us pledge to defend the brave defenders of universal values of peace, hope, and dignity for all.
Shamima Ali, thank you very much for speaking to me. That's the program for this episode. Join me again soon when we will have another guest on the show.